As sports history fans, we often reminisce about the legends. Willis Reed limping onto the NBA Finals court, Kurt Schilling's bloody sock, Kerry Strug's courageous dismount, and so many more. These moments often define sports history. But what about the countless injuries that did not become legends, or careers that were derailed due to inadequate care? That's where this episode's sponsor comes in. Introducing to you, ILP Sports Consultants, your trusted sports injury partner, available 24/7. Brian Maelli at ILP Sports Consultants has over 20 years of experience in the orthopedic and sports medicine industry, and he has worked with athletes across the gamut, from youth to amateurs, professionals, in almost every sport played in the United States of America, accommodating athletes at every stage of their career. This adaptability ensures that ILP services are perfectly tailored to your skill level, no matter where you are in your athletic journey. With ILP, you are in control. Choose the steps that matter most to you. Diagnosis, treatment plan, recovery, or the whole journey. ILP services are tailored to your unique needs. Rushing for care is a common pitfall, leading to future problems. ILP Sports Consultants helps you make the right decisions, ensuring that you receive timely and safe care. And here's a bonus. Brian hosts the Injured List podcast, sharing insights and athlete stories you won't want to miss. Whether you're a concerned parent or grandparent, or an athlete yourself seeking guidance, ILP Sports Consultants is your beacon of hope in sports injury management. Visit ilpsports.com today. That's the letters ilpsports.com. ILP Sports Consultants, where your well-being is the priority and your recovery is the mission. Choose ILP Sports Consultants for a healthier sports journey, helping you get back in the game the smart way.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats, football history and its memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats podcasting and broadcasting network. In conjunction with Swick Enterprises, and we're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats magazine. And I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats magazine is the only publication in America which focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 140 plus years of football history and memorabilia, and you can find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. It is at this time I'd like to introduce my special guest co-host. He is a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats magazine, a football memorabilia historian who has an intensive and historical 19th century collection of football memorabilia, along with an incredible complete set run of football cards. He's been our guest co-host in the past, and I'd like to welcome once again Mr. Jeff Payne. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Afternoon, Bob. Evening, Bob, I guess it is now. How you doing?
I'm very thankful that you agreed to fill in. You got big shoes to fill in tonight. when Joe's out, but I know you can do the job and do it well. And I appreciate you coming up.
I don't know if anybody can fill Joe's shoes, but looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being on, and I'd like to lead off our banter before our guest comes on. And I would like to talk about football matchbooks. And I know you have, and I've seen your amazing collection of them. And I'd like for you to, fill in our audience on what you have, and I'll be asking a few questions on it as we go along. So let's start off. What do you have in them, and how'd you get started with them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. I mean, I love matchbooks. I don't know about you, but there's just something appealing to them, particularly the old ones from the 30s and 40s. There's some great runs I can talk about that are out there. Everything from the diamond matchbooks in the 30s to the redskin ones in the 40s, and there's a lot of one-offs, matchbook-wise. I got kind of into it because, as you know, there's some players in that era, just because of the time frame when there weren't a lot of cards, that they don't have a lot of cardboard images, and some of those Hall of Famers and those stars are on matchbooks. And so if you're into collecting, true rookies or pre-rookie cards or whatever you want to call it, matchbooks are the place to go. And so I kind of started with those because I've always tried to find the first card of a player, and a lot of those were early 30s matchbooks, and I just got kind of hooked on them. They're not that expensive, other than of course some exceptions. So it's kind of fun to collect them because it's not a costly endeavor compared to maybe some other sets. And there's teams you read about that we obviously didn't see on these matchbooks because they're teams that aren't in existence any longer, which is, I think, really cool. And you don't see that often in cards. And so I just kind of got into it. And then I'm a set collector, as you mentioned. Once I start on something, it's just a matter of time before I get sucked in, right? And I start trying to complete that. So, that's happened with the matchbooks as well.
Well, your collection is amazing. I know I have probably 60, 70 matchbooks in my collection, all various players and from the different series and the like. And I do agree with you. I mean, matchbooks today are really not widely found anymore because, people don't use them anymore. Everybody uses lighters or whatever. But they are representing a part of history, especially with the football matchbooks. That is, as you say, a lot of the first actual photos of a player and or, quote-unquote, a first card of a player can be found on these matchbooks and or defunct teams at the same time. So it's a great collectible. And to me, it's always been relatively affordable because a lot of individuals kind of overlooked it or were never educated on it, so they never really collected it at the same time. So it's something to me is very, very appealing to any collector per se. So I'll throw out immediately, if we look at the diamond matchbooks of the 30s, what are some of the more difficult sets and or individual matchbooks that a collector can collect?
Yeah, I call the diamond matchbook run, from 33 to 38, kind of the granddaddy of the matchbook runs, because there's other runs like the Redskin ones I mentioned that came a little later and a few other, team sets. But the diamond matchbooks are kind of the granddaddy. I think there's like 400 of them in that era from 33 to 38. In my opinion, by far and away, the hardest one to complete, and I certainly have not completed it, is the 1934 set. First, it's the biggest. Right. It's a beast. It's 125 matchbooks, and there are multiple colors for those matchbooks. In fact, could be up to 4. Nobody's sure that the checklist is even complete because there's also some short prints. For whatever reason, the Bears and the Packers are just really difficult to find, and nobody knows why. Like, why those teams, right? We don't really know how they were distributed and how it all happened, but completing that set is a bear. I'm down to needing of the 125. I think I'm down to needing around 30 or so.
Wow.
But they're all the big dogs, from a short print perspective. And so I don't know if I'll ever actually complete that set. Once you get past 34, I would say the next hardest is 33, the first year they came out.
Right.
And 33, it's not that you can't find them. It doesn't appear to have as many short prints as 34, but it has a lot of stars, right? I mean, you're talking Turk Edwards and Arnie Herber, and Grange is in there, and Hap Morin and Nagurski and Ken Strong, and on and on and on. And so those tend to be pretty pricey because they're Hall of Famers, right? Whereas the 34 set is pricey because they're short prints and they're just really hard to find. I'm down to needing 6 of the 33s. There's 95 in the set. I need 6 more to complete it. And they don't look like they're going to be – it's just a matter of finding them, right? It's not that they're short prints or anything. And then the rest of them are actually very, very easy from 35 to 38. There's a few, tricky ones in there, but I've completed 35 and completed 36. I've completed, or I think I need 1 in 37, and I need like 2 in 38 or something. So those are almost all complete, and they're a lot easier and also a lot smaller. At least 36 through 38 is a lot smaller.
Right. The one thing I noticed over the years collecting them, on and off as I have, is that there's a lot of mislabeling of what the matchbook is. For example, a dealer or an individual who gets them posts them, let's say, on eBay as the wrong year or the wrong series. Have you seen a lot of that over the years? I would assume you probably have. I don't know though.
Oh yeah, and not just that. I mean, ones that are PSA labeled. In fact, I just within the last week sent an email to an auction house. I won't name the auction house. It wasn't their it wasn't their fault. They had an auction up, and I was just perusing through it, and I saw a matchbook. And as soon as I saw it, I said, "Oh, that's not the right year." And I looked at the flip, and the flip was wrong. So I sent the auctioneer a note. He actually said, "Yeah, I sent that in as the year you're describing. I don't know these very well." And PSA sent it back and told me I had it wrong. Now I got to go tell them they had it wrong. So
wow.
And I had a lot of trouble up front differentiating between them, particularly 34 and 35, because they are very similar, and then 36 and 37. And until I kind of got into it and kind of learned what they look like in the nuances, they are kind of tough. If you don't collect them, they are tough to tell apart.
Right. And I'm surprised.
And they are mislabeled a lot, which you can use to your advantage, right? They're always mislabeled on eBay. I mean, nobody knows the years on eBay. They're always wrong.
And I'm still surprised people send them out to be graded. I mean, I don't see what the attraction would be to grade those. Those are the type of pieces, especially if you have a full book with the matches in it, that you want to display it rather than encapsulate it. You know what I mean? So I definitely not. As much as I as everyone knows, I have a lot of questions on grading. That's something to me that should not be graded. You should just put them in pages and enjoy looking at them, type of thing. Whether you got them flat open or whether you have the actual matchbook or whatever, or if the strikers are missing. They're amazing pieces of football history that have lasted that many years. And I always say the paper drives of World War II took a lot of that paper, even from a lowly matchbook, and was recycled for the war effort. So again, how many of these matchbooks out of those 400 still exist? I mean, we're looking at 30, 40 of each, maybe 50 each, 100. I don't know. I have no clue, and I'm not going to go by any type of population report either, because a lot of people like myself, like yourself, and a lot of other collectors don't get them graded. You know what I mean? So we prefer seeing them.
Grade,
Yeah,
they don't grade very high usually either, right? There's there's staple holes where the somebody took the matches out or opened the flip up. A lot of times the striker is ripped because the matches were used and they, tore up the striker. Sometimes people cut them off. People number them on the back. A lot of old school collectors, because they're not numbered, would put the number, right? They were keeping on the checklist, right? And so a lot of them have, pencil or ink on the back. Yeah, they're
Yep.
not really the kind of thing that you're going to get in high grade unless you're getting some of the proofs. Like there are proofs
Right.
out there, ones that were never distributed, never folded, so they don't have any fold marks. Those will grade really high, but I don't really consider those, that's not what I'm collecting. I'm collecting ones that were distributed and used,
Right.
and that means, they were used. So they're not going to grade
Right.
very high in general. So I agree with you. I don't know why you'd ever grade them. It's so easy to put them in binders and display them, and they look so great that that's what I do.
Right. I just think they displayed much more nicely in sheets in a binder, and to be able to look at them and pull them out and actually examine them more closely. To me, it's the best way to learn about them and look at them. One quick story on them. I did and have done in the past the Paper Mania show here in Hartford at the Civic Center, and there was a dealer there who just dealt in matchbooks of all types of hobbies, sports, advertising, so on and so forth. And he told me at the show, it was interesting. He had a couple football matchbooks which I bought from him. They didn't have the strikers or anything. They were pretty beat. But he says sports ones I normally can't hold on to for a long period of time because there's such a demand for them. And I echoed to him that I could see why, especially in football because they're tough to find, so on and so forth. But he was very knowledgeable. And he said, I've collected them all my life and I've dealt with them all my life. And I thought that was pretty interesting because there's very few pure paper type of dealers who just deal only in matchbooks. I find it very interesting.
Right.
And there's there was at one time 2 or 3 different organizations for collectors to join on them. I think they all combined into one. I'm not sure on that though. So, but it was interesting. Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Any interesting story as far as collecting them of a find that you made at a show or via an auction or mail or with another collector or whatever it may be?
Yeah, a couple things spring to mind. One is I ran into someone a lot like what you're describing. I don't know if it was the same individual or just one of others, but, a hardcore matchbook collector who, I met through eBay. And, he was advertising, I've got this, I don't remember how many, tens of thousands of matchbooks he had collected and he was selling. It was a tremendous number of matchbooks. And he had a few football. Obviously, he had everything else because he was collecting everything, and struck up a discussion with him. And he's been a pretty good source for a few. He keeps his eyes open for the things that I need, which is kind of nice. The other story is, there's a Red Grange matchbook out there for a defunct nightclub that he either owned or had his name associated with. It was called the 77 Club. And I actually first saw it, I believe it was when the Dryers sold all of their stuff years ago in a couple of humongous auctions, as you remember. They had just an incredible collection of everything. And I saw this matchbook, and I'd never seen it before, and it has Grange on it, and it mentions his club, and I was like, oh, my gosh, I need that. Didn't win it. Somebody else got it, obviously, as a collector, all bummed and depressed. And then it probably took 5, 6, 7 years before it rolled back around. And lately it rolled back around and came back up for auction. I think it was the exact same one. I went back and looked, and it looked very similar. And I was able to get it this time. But the irony is like a month later, and this always happens, of course, I'm perusing eBay, and, up pops another one at a very low buy it now. Someone who clearly did not know how, rare this matchbook was. And I didn't even hesitate. I was like, well, I guess I got 2. Click. And this one had all the matches in it. So I got one with no matches, and now I have one with full matches, and got it for, ironically, a fraction of the cost of the one with no matches in it, because somebody who didn't know anything about it put it up on eBay. So I'm sure. That happens.
Yeah, it just amazes me how many collectors, or not, let me rephrase that, many people trying to sell stuff, whether they're a dealer or collector or just they found it in the attic. They go on eBay, they make a judgment of what they think it's actually worth. And sometimes it's worth, obviously, they're putting it out for pennies on the dollar. and at other times they're putting dollars on pennies, if you know what I mean. So the
Exactly.
extremes are there all the time. It's just amazing to me. It's just amazing to see. And I don't spend as much time as I used to on eBay for a variety of reasons, but I'm just shocked at some of the stuff people are advertising at the prices they're advertising, and totally floored when I see something that, let's say it should be worth $1,000, they get it for sale for $99. Buy it now, type of thing. It doesn't make sense to me, to say the least. But that's a great guy to pick that. Wow.
Yeah, I thought so. One last thought there is, and so many people are down on eBay. I mean, a lot of people, you don't use eBay, you can't get deals anymore. I totally agree with you. A lot of stuff you see is way overpriced, and it's a whatever. But then if you're diligent, if you just keep on it and you know what you're doing, you will find some great deals on eBay.
Right.
But when they come up, you better hit that button fast, because I guarantee you within an hour somebody else who knows of it would have seen it and would have bought it. So deals are out there.
That's a word to the wise for the collector and the savvy collector who understands something. They see the value of it, and they will buy it, type of thing. My wife always says that to me when we go someplace, like we're in an antique shop or whatever, and I see something and I say, why do these people have this at this price? I mean, they're giving it away, type of thing. They have no clue what it is, type of thing. And obviously I got to pick it up because I don't want to pass it up. I know I can either resell it or I can trade it for something I need. But it just really amazes me. It truly amazes me. So, all right, that's good. I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about your matchbooks and your collection. One last thought on my part: I love the college rivalry matchbooks. I always enjoyed those. I always thought those were so cool to look at. Mm-hmm. And I have quite a few. I don't have the complete set of those, but that's a great area to collect also. I truly enjoy it. All right. Our special guest is here, and I'd like to introduce him. He was last on our show back all the way in 2012. He has a super collection of Buffalo Bills cards and memorabilia with over 100,000 items, many of which are now housed at the Buffalo History Museum. In my opinion, and the opinion of the hobby, he is the authority on all items Buffalo Bills. And I'd like to introduce once again and welcome back to our show, Mr. Greg Trantner. Greg, welcome.
Hey, Bob and Jeff. Hey, thanks a lot for having me on. It's great to be back.
I appreciate you coming back on, and I am always in awe of your collection. And I know you and I go back many, many years when you bought that infamous Bowen Field, New Haven Bills preseason game program from me. I don't even know how many years ago. It was quite a few years ago. But I was always impressed with your collection, and you were one of the original subscribers to the Football Times newsletter at the same time. So I thank you for subscribing to that also. How'd you get started collecting all your Buffalo Bills?
Very simple. Very simple. My dad took me to my first Bills game when I was 8 years old at the old Rock Pile in 1965. The Bills were playing the Denver Broncos. It was Cookie Gilchrist's first game back in Buffalo as a Bronco after he had been traded. And my dad took me, and I still have the game ticket, the game program, and he bought me a bobblehead doll at outside the stadium before the game, and I still have that. And that experience of getting those collectibles, but then just walking in and seeing the game, and of course the Bills won that day, 31-13. So it cemented my interest. And then this was 1965, and that was actually the first year I started collecting football cards. And of course the Topps Tall Boys were out, and the Bills have a pink background on their players, which I fell in love with. And then for Christmas, my dad bought me a Johnny Hero Buffalo Bills doll.
Wow.
And
Wow.
those three things cemented my both my love for the Bills and totally got me into collecting memorabilia and all sorts.
And you've been at it ever since, I'm guessing, Greg. Is that true?
Yeah, I've been at it ever since.
Huh?
I mean, by and large, as a kid, I of course collected football cards every season, and I would keep the ticket in the program from games my dad took me to, but we would only go to like one game a year or something. And then when I graduated from college, I decided I really wanted to collect the history of the team, and then of course I had my own money, and that's when I really got really broadened the collection beyond football cards and my own the games I attended.
And I'll point out too, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. You basically started collecting before collecting was really in vogue and took off, basically back in the 80s.
Oh yeah. No, I graduated from college in 1978, and I started collecting seriously right then. And forward from that point forward.
Wow.
Which is why I have over 100,000 objects in the collection.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was first thing I was thinking of was, where the heck do you keep it all? But I remember when you were on in 2012, you had some amazing stuff. What have you picked up since then that you're really fond of? Or is there anything you want to share that you've gotten recently?
Yeah, there's probably about a half a dozen things that I think are quite interesting. One, Jim Kelly's first USFL signed contract with the Houston Gamblers. That was signed June 21st, 1983. It's signed by Kelly. It's also signed by USFL Commissioner Chet Simmons. It was a $275,000 annual salary and a $500,000 interest-free loan.
Okay.
So that was, and I only got that here in the last couple of months. So that's a pretty interesting. And then I picked up O.J. Simpson's Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame ring.
Oh wow!
And then of course, that the NFL in 2015 started all the Color Rush jerseys. And so I picked up a Jerry Hughes red Bills Color Rush jersey from the first time they wore them on November 12th, 2015 against the Jets. And then I picked up a Dick Cunningham, who was a linebacker and an offensive guard for the Bills for 6 years, a standing Buffalo helmet from 1972. But the unique story about Cunningham is in his second year, he started dating Al B. Miller, who was a teammate, his sister. They dated for 2 weeks, got married, and have been married for over 50 years.
Wow.
That's
so
cool.
kind of an interesting story. I wrote to him and told him I had his helmet and stuff, and so we started corresponding, and he told me that story, so that was pretty good. And then
that's an awesome story.
And then two stories related to Mary Wilson, who's the widow of Bills owner Ralph Wilson. In 1998, in a game here in Foxborough, Massachusetts, there was a couple of really bad calls at the end of the game that cost the Bills the game. In fact, I think it's the only time in NFL history they called a pass interference on a Hail Mary pass, gave the Patriots the ball on the 1 yard line, and they scored the winning touchdown on the next play. It's the only time in Ralph's career that he was fined. He was fined by Paul Tagliabue $50,000. Well, later that year, Mary bought a statue in New Orleans of a blind ref, and she gave it to Ralph as a gift. And that statue sat in the Bills administration building since 1998. Until a year ago, and the Pagulas have made some changes to the administration office, so they sold a bunch of stuff that was in the administration office, and so I won the blind ref.
Wow. That's iconic.
Yeah,
that's totally cool.
And then Mary did an event at the Buffalo History Museum a couple weeks ago. We have this series called Evening with an Icon. Last year we had Thurman Thomas. This year we did Mary. and it's a couple-hour program. Well, at the end of the program, she announced that she would be donating to the History Museum Ralph's Hall of Fame bust.
Great.
And there's only two. There's one at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the enshrinee gets one. And she's donating it to be part of the Tranter collection at the History Museum. So we were pretty stunned. Yeah. So those are some of the things I picked up.
You mentioned the Buffalo History Museum. Obviously, it sounds like you have a lot of things that are housed there. What's the relationship with the Bills and the History Museum and all that? It sounds like, obviously, it's a pretty close relationship between you and the Bills with all the awesome memorabilia you have. We have a very, very collaborative relationship. They actually have been this fall. They've had some 60th anniversary video clips they've been doing every week during the season, and they had come over before the season started, and they took a whole bunch of video footage of different artifacts at the museum, and every one of the video clips that they've been doing to celebrate their 60th anniversary has had memorabilia from the collection in it. Wow.
So things like that, their marketing people have been over to the museum. So we have it's a good working, a very good working relationship. Thurman Thomas, who's employed by the Bills, he's been the spokesperson for the Icons exhibit that we opened in the fall of 2017. He actually did a signing basically in October. It was a Saturday in October. He did an autograph signing at the museum. And like I said, he was our Evening with an Icon last year. So we have a good relationship with the Bills.
Sounds like a road trip, Bob. We need to get to the Buffalo History Museum.
Yes, you guys need to come up.
Yeah,
I know. I couldn't make your last offer, Greg, but I definitely want to come up one weekend and take in a game with you and check out the museum. So I will be up there. Don't worry, I will make it.
All right.
It's on my list of things to do, to say the least. So,
all right.
Bucket list.
Great, and the Bills might actually be getting competitive here, so that might make it more enticing.
There you go.
It's amazing. All right, I want to put you on the spot, Greg. I asked you this question 7 years ago. I'll ask you again, and maybe it's changed since then. What are the top 6 favorite items that you have in your collection, and if you could describe them to our audience?
Sure. First and number one, and it's because I'm a history geek, is I have every Bills game program from every game they've ever played: home, away, neutral sites, playoffs, Super Bowls. And so that tells the history of the team from 1960 to the present. And so that's actually my favorite part of the collection. And I have 7 4-drawer filing cabinets, and the programs are all in manila files with the ticket stub, with the newspaper articles. And so if you call and you want to know something that happened at the game, no matter when it was, I can easily get it. I have the game books from the NFL. So that is the history of the team. I have an Art Baker blue and silver jersey. So the Bills only wore blue and silver in 1960 and 1961 because Ralph Wilson, before he bought the Bills and joined the American Football League, he was a part owner of the Detroit Lions. And so he brought the Lions colors to the Bills in their first 2 seasons. Buster Ramsey, their head coach, was the Lions defensive coordinator, and he was the Bills head coach in the first couple seasons. And there are, I don't know of others that exist. There may be out there in the hobby someplace, but it's certainly a very rare jersey to find.
Wow.
My third unique, maybe the most unique item in the collection is you two guys will probably recall that Jack Kemp was a politician following his pro football career.
Mm-hmm.
He ran he ran as the vice presidential candidate under with Bob Dole in the 1996 presidential campaign and presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
During the campaign, of course, he was assigned Secret Service agents. Those Secret Service agents wore lapel pins that were standing buffalo helmets, which is when Kemp played. And there are two different ones, and I have both of them, and I bought them from a Secret Service agent that guarded Kemp during the presidential campaign.
Wow. That's awesome.
And then Scott Norwood, we'll all remember Scott Norwood for the famous wide right kick. Yep. Well, I have the helmet that he wore in that game, which I would argue, other than maybe his shoe, would be maybe the most iconic collectible in Super Bowl history. Because what most people don't realize, it's the only Super Bowl that was won or lost on a single kick. The other ones, the Adam Vinatieri kicks, the Jim O'Brien kick, those were, if they missed the kick, the game went to overtime. They weren't to win or lose. This is the only kick in Super Bowl history to win or lose. And arguably it was, if not one of the greatest, if not the greatest Super Bowl ever, it certainly is in the top 5 of the greatest games ever. From a Super Bowl perspective.
Right, if you put that helmet on, it's like maybe the face guard in front of his eyes, or was he looking out the ear hole by mistake? Or, could you figure out what happened on that kick? Because that was crushing for some of us that were really rooting hard for the Bills.
It was very crushing to be sitting in Tampa Stadium, and I was at the other end of the field, and from my vantage point, it looked like it was good.
So you were there, wow.
So for a brief instant, I thought we were Super Bowl champions until I saw the Giants jumping up and down. Yep. And then 2 other to fill out the 6. I have stadium seats from War Memorial Stadium, which is where the Bills' initial home was in 1937. Was when the stadium was opened. What many people don't realize is there's a long professional football history at War Memorial Stadium before the Bills. In fact, there was an article, Bob, that you published in the magazine about War Memorial Stadium being the most popular neutral site of NFL games played from 1938 to 1960. And then, of course, they had an AFC team there. And so there's quite a bit of history. Plus, the Bills won the 1964 AFL championship at War Memorial Stadium. And in 1966, they lost the championship to go to Super Bowl I, and Kansas City won at War Memorial Stadium and went to Super Bowl I. So I have seats from the stadium, from original seats.
Wow.
And then the last of the 6 is I have a game-worn jersey of O.J. Simpson from his 1973 season when he rushed for 2,000 yards. It's not the game he broke the record, it was actually from the Colts game. I think it was their 5th game of the season. And of course, what most people don't remember is O.J. is still the only NFL player to rush for 2,000 yards in 14 games.
Right.
Everyone that's rushed for 2,000 yards since then did it in either game 15 or game 16. So he's the only one.
Have you ever?
Yeah, that's
I'm just
awesome.
I'm just curious. Have you ever talked to O.J. Simpson in person? Either before or after the incident. Okay.
Actually, 6 months prior, the Bills had a 20th anniversary celebration in 1993 of his 2,000-yard season, and they had a dinner at a hotel in Buffalo. And I bought tickets, and they had a big cocktail hour, and OJ was out chatting with everybody. I chatted with him for a while. He's the most friendly guy you'd ever meet. Very personable, very easy to talk to. And that was 6 months before. In fact, I think the next day was when he wore his Bruno Mali shoes, and they were
wow.
they took a picture of them. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that would be a nice
small world
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
you know,
Greg,
I mean, you know, he was my childhood hero. I mean, I was, you know, from the time he played at USC, I was 11, and when the Bills drafted him, I was 12. I mean, he was my childhood hero. I mean, you know, a player like that coming to Buffalo, you know, at the time, I mean, he was a superstar. So
yeah, no, he was something else on the field. I'll tell you, there's no doubt about that.
Right.
Hey, so Greg, I'm kind of a history buff too, and I was reading about your new book that you have out, Makers, Moments, and Memorabilia, Chronicle of Buffalo Professional Sports. Can you talk about that book and what's included in the book? And I got my finger right over top of the buy it now. So, you know, I'm hoping you push me over the edge here. No, I'm going to buy it. It sounds awesome, but I'd love to hear more about it and how that all came about.
Sure. What really it really generated from, as I think you guys know, I curated an exhibit for the History Museum called Icons, the Makers and Moments of Buffalo Sports, that we opened in 2017. And, of course, that covers Buffalo sports history, professional sports history. And during that, as you would imagine, I did a tremendous amount of research that you don't show in an exhibit because you can't. You only have, 60 to 80 word labels and so on and so forth. So I had all this material, and so I went to the executive director of the History Museum and said, I should write a book, and I'll be glad to have all the proceeds go to the museum. Well, to make a long story short, we ended up collaborating with both the History Museum and a publishing company called Western New York Heritage, which is a nonprofit publishing company in Buffalo that publishes a history magazine every quarter. And so we collaborated. I wrote the manuscripts from all the research that we did. I selected all the photos and memorabilia that are displayed in the book, and then Western New York Heritage, they did all the design work and the printing and ultimately the release of the book. So we have a great relationship. But the book itself explores Buffalo's professional sports history. It features stories, I would say striking photos, very unique artifacts that span more than 150 years, from 1857 to the present day. It explores the origins of professional sports in Buffalo, how everything started, and the key founders of the major teams that are or were in Buffalo. Every professional sports team that has played in Buffalo is represented. Football teams, baseball teams, basketball teams, soccer teams. There's even a women's softball team. There was a world team tennis team. They're all covered. And then fans will relive many unforgettable moments. So we capture a number of individual moments. Like, for example, in 1984, the Bills were 0-11 and hosted the Dallas Cowboys. And on the first play of the game, Greg Bell ran 85 yards for a touchdown, and the Bills upset the Cowboys that day 14-3. And so we'll capture those kind of things that a lot of Bills fans will either remember, or if they were too young, they'll be inspired by, wow, that's very cool that that happened. We think that this is really the first of its kind of book, in that I don't know of any other book that's been written about all of the professional sports teams from a single community. Clearly, there's been tons of books written about individual teams, but to talk about the full professional sports history of a community, I don't think has been done before. The book is 168 pages. It's about 40,000 words. There's 248 photos, which include action photos, as well as memorabilia and artifacts. As I think I mentioned, the book is a collaboration of the two nonprofits, the Buffalo History Museum and Western New York Heritage. All of the proceeds of the sale of the book go to the two nonprofits. So it's also a generator for revenue for the two organizations. For me, the book was a labor of love. Obviously, I love Buffalo sports, and so it allowed me to even find things out that I didn't even know. And part of what I tried to do in the book was tell some stories that people don't know. Even the most ardent Buffalo fan, there's stuff in there that they don't know because I didn't know.
Wow.
And so I think everybody will enjoy it. I think the photos just do it, a real service. And so I think people will really get a lot of memories, or if they didn't experience it, they would really appreciate the breadth of Buffalo's sports history. And we had four corporate sponsors that basically paid for the publication of the book. Independent Health, New Era Cap, NTT Data, and the Baird Foundation all donated money so that we could cover all of the expenses of the book before it was published, so that the proceeds can go to the two nonprofits. So just really exciting for me. Of course, it's the first book I've had published, and so it's very exciting to be a first-time author. So I just feel really good about it. There's some really interesting football stories. Again, a lot of people don't know. I mean, I know you guys do, but Buffalo had an original franchise in the National Football League all the way back to 1920. There's a disputed championship in 1921 that, in Buffalo it's referred to as the Staley Swindle, where, the Buffalo All-Americans claimed the championship. They had beaten Chicago, thought they were champions, and then the owner agreed to play two what he thought were postseason exhibition games, beat Akron, lost to Chicago, and then George Halas claimed that was really for the championship and was more important, and convinced his fellow owners, and they awarded the championship to Chicago, and the Buffalo owner, Frank McNeil, fought that for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that was and House did that a couple times, or tried to do that a couple times. I know he tried to do that in 24 as well. I remember that. So I was curious how much coverage you gave to the All-Americans and Elmer Oliphant and some of the other players. Just based on the time frame, I figured they were in there. So that's totally cool.
Yes, they're in there.
That's awesome.
And then the other thing that a lot of people don't know is in 1940, the American Football League that was formed in 1940 and played in 1940 and 41 as a competitor to the NFL, the founding of the league and the original league documents were crafted at the Hotel Lafayette in downtown Buffalo. The AFL was a legitimate competitor to the NFL, and if it hadn't been for Pearl Harbor, maybe Buffalo would be the Canton, Ohio of pro football.
There you go. Yeah.
So just a couple of stories.
That's awesome. Yeah, and as you know, obviously, Buffalo kind of got hosed when the AAFC got merged with the NFL, because the Bills were, that was a pretty strong franchise with a really strong fan base.
Yes. And, that's where George Halas came back to haunt us.
Exactly.
He had a hatred for Buffalo after the 1921 debacle.
Jeez, he's got a long memory, huh?
Yes. So he got Buffalo out of the NFL.
Gee whiz.
Yep.
Greg, do you have any favorite collecting story you'd like to share with our listeners about anything you picked up over the years? And I know you have numerous ones, but does anything stick out above and beyond?
Yeah, there's one, and it comes back to Mary Wilson. So I attended the Hall of Fame enshrinement of Ralph Wilson in 2009. Bruce Smith also went in with that class. And at the Hall of Fame enshrinement, at the Gold Jacket dinner, after the dinner, they sell a Hall of Fame stein that has all of the enshrinees of that year and a picture of them on the stein. And I bought two steins. later that fall, I was asked to give a talk at the Monday Quarterback Club about my collection, and also at that time, the History Museum was doing a 50th anniversary exhibit, which was part of my collection. And during my talk, unbeknownst to me, Mary Wilson was in the audience. And she came up to me afterwards and asked me if I would give her a personal tour of the exhibit. And I said, sure. Wow. So she came over to the History Museum, and while I'm giving her the tour, she sees the Stein, and it says, where did you get that? And I said, I got it at the Hall of Fame. And she said, well, they were all sold out by the time Ralph and I got out of the dinner. And I said, well, I have a second one, and I'd be happy to give it to you. But I said, it's back in my home in Massachusetts, and I'm not going to mail it, but I'd be happy to give it to you when I come to Buffalo for a Bills game. And so we exchanged contact information. 3 days later, she calls me and says, would you really be willing to do that? And I said, absolutely. So she invited me to the owner's box for the Patriots-Bills game a week later.
Wow.
And I go to the owner's box, and if you guys haven't been in Ralph Wilson Stadium or New Era Field now, but it's an old concrete edifice, right? So I walk up to the box, and it's concrete, and there's this big metal door, and I tell the guard who I am, and he lets me in. And all I can tell you is it was like going from Kansas to the Wizard of Oz. You walk in, and it's the most palatial thing you would ever see. Beautiful art on the walls, mahogany all over the place, beautiful carpet. I mean, it was incredible. And there's two boxes. There's their guest box, and then there's Ralph's box. And you only go into Ralph's box if invited. So we go in, and my son was with me, and we kind of do our, they offer us food and drinks and everything, and then we get invited into Ralph's box. And for 30 minutes, my son and I are with Ralph and Mary Wilson talking about the Buffalo Bills, and he's asking me questions about my collection and my love for the Bills, and he's telling me all this stuff about the Bills, and I give him the Stein. And they gave me a bag full of stuff that they had given out to people that went to their Hall of Fame induction party. Tickets to the party, all kinds of stuff. And I was just completely blown away. And here I am 10 years, this is 2009, and here I am 10 years later with a relationship with Mary Wilson, and she's donating a Hall of Fame bust. Is pretty incredible. Pretty incredible.
Wow. Unbelievable. That is an amazing story. I just got chills on my back listening to it. In all seriousness, I mean, that's amazing. I was hoping you were going to say they gave you lifetime tickets to the Bills game for being
I was thinking,
such a dedicated collector and fan. I thought that, let's throw this guy something. Get him tickets. No big deal. It doesn't have to be a box. I mean, just give him. I'm sure they got him.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, the Hall of Fame bust, and of course they were the Ralph Wilson Foundation was also a sponsor of the Icons exhibit too. So they named the gallery. It's the Ralph C. Wilson Gallery in the History Museum. So they've been great to me and great to the organization. So there is something about building relationships and doing something nice for people.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
An unforgettable experience.
I was going to ask you what your most memorable Bills game is. You mentioned two that were obviously memorable. The Norwood wide right, although it didn't end well, was, as you mentioned, one of the best Super Bowls that's ever happened. And then it sounds like a fabulous experience. And I can't imagine sitting through a game talking to one of the icons of the NFL like Ralph Wilson. That's totally cool. Are those the most memorable games you've been involved in, or have there been some others?
Yeah, from a fan, I would say there's three others that really stick out. The AFC Championship game on January 20th, 1991, when the Bills beat the Raiders 51-3 to go to Super Bowl 25.
I remember that game like it was yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were ahead 41-3 at the half. We knew we were going to the Super Bowl. I mean, the second half was nothing but a party in the stadium.
Yeah.
So that one, and then of course the greatest NFL comeback when we were losing 35-3 in the third quarter, and came back and beat the Oilers 41-38 in overtime. As Van Miller, who's my favorite broadcaster of all time, described it as it was happening, he said it was like a tidal wave. The fans were just insane. I mean, we didn't sit down. We didn't stop screaming from midway through the third quarter till the end of the game. And then on the negative side, I was at Home Run Throwback in Tennessee on January 8th, 2000. And we had the game won, and all the Tennessee fans around me were congratulating me that, congratulations, the Bills deserve it. And then, 30 seconds later, it's like, oh my God, what happened?
Wow. You think about it, the Bills have been involved in some very memorable NFL games. Some of the ones you mentioned, just, games that everybody that's a fan remembers and has heard about. Right.
Well, it's the biggest rout in the win over the Raiders is the biggest rout in AFC Championship game history.
Yeah.
And that was the Al Davis Raiders. Who came in and basically said they were gonna kill the Bills, and the funniest part of the game is 5 plays into it, the Bills are running the no huddle so fast that Howie Long called a timeout to catch his breath. It was like a basketball timeout.
and I'm sure Howie will never forget that as long as he lives.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Well, Greg, we're almost out of time. I got to ask you one more question. Excuse me. What advice would you give for beginning collectors, if any?
Well, it's gonna harken back to kind of what I've talked about. I mean, eBay is an efficient and a fast way to find collectibles, as you guys were talking about earlier in the show. If you're diligent, you can find all kinds of stuff. The interesting part is I amassed the vast majority of my collection long before eBay was even thought of. But I would still advise invest in building a network of collectors and friends. Go to card shows, go to card shops, flea markets, garage sales. Meet people, develop relationships. They'll pay huge dividends as you continue to collect for the long term. And I can tell you, many of my best friends today are people I've met through the hobby over the 50 years. And it's just those relationships, and just like the Mary Wilson example, I mean, and I can give you tons of examples like that where friends of mine have called and said, hey, I saw this, do you need it? You'd be amazed at the number of things I've found because I got referred by, a fellow collector that I met along the way. And they're fun. The relationships are fun.
Most definitely. I vaguely remember what was a couple of years back. I bought out a collector of some football stuff he had, and I know I sent you whatever it was. I think it was the letterhead of an old letterhead of the Bills or whatever. It was pretty interesting. So I go right away when I saw it. Greg will probably like it. I'm sure he has it already, but I'll have another issue. But those are things that build relationships, right? I mean, it's like, and we go back way back. Yeah. How many years have we known each other now? And I know. I feel really old.
Right. But then you have me on the show, and
oh,
you get.
I mean, 30 plus years probably. Over 30.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I definitely back into the 80s.
Yeah, it's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, Greg. I truly appreciate you being on the show and talking about your incredible collection and about all the things you're doing now. It's just amazing to me, and I've always been an envy of your collection over the years because it's just so complete. It's just so perfect as far as I'm concerned. I truly thank you for being on. I also want to thank you publicly for all the support and articles you write for Gridiron Greats magazine. There's just some phenomenal stuff of reading it. And I got to say this, my wife enjoys reading them too. And she's fascinated by the stuff you come up with. So I appreciate it immensely.
Well, thank you, Bob. And hey, thanks a lot for being on the show and, having me on the show. And thanks so much for actually letting me submit articles, and I really enjoy doing that, and we have a great relationship, and I really appreciate that. And Jeff, hey, it's great to talk to you again too. So thanks a lot.
Yes, you too.
Thank you. Greg Trentner, Buffalo Bills, Super Collector. We're down to about 2 minutes. We're going to go in our 2-minute warning and wrap up. Jeff, I'm going to hand off to you. What'd you pick up on tonight's show?
Wow. 2 things rattling around in my head, Bob. First is I love talking to people who have a passion for history, particularly, of course, when it's football related. I mean, he rolls his eyes back and talks about Buffalo history, and I just love when people do that, right? And I can't wait to get his book. Those are the kind of people, they're gold, and they're preserving the history of our sport. And, if the NFL's not going to do it, we need to do it, right? And he's doing it. He's doing it. And as he mentioned, he's documenting the history of the entire sports, professional sports, scene in Buffalo since it started. I mean, how cool is that, right? I just love that stuff. That's one. Two is what he said about the network and community and stuff like that, just, really hits home for me and you, right? I mean, I always say that, the cardboard is just an excuse to, meet people and build friendships and just enjoy each other's company and talk about something that we really enjoy, which is football and football memorabilia. And I think he's right on about, getting out there and meeting people and talking and whatever, it'll come back to you, right? You give something away to the Bills like he did. Yeah. Look what came back to him, and he did it for the right reason. He did it just because it was, a good thing to do, right? And right. I just think that's a really important piece of the hobby that unfortunately sometimes people in the hobby don't appreciate or don't focus on.
Very true, very true. We're almost out of time. We've got about 10 seconds. I want to again thank Greg for being on. And I want to thank you, Jeff, for being my guest co-host tonight. It was a great show. So good to talk to Greg. And again, it makes me think of how many of friends like Greg I have in the hobby and being in the hobby for so many years. Thanks for listening.
Yep, it was a blast.
We'll be back hopefully next week for another show. Take care.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.